About 1/100% of all the votes cast.
Yeah.
Widespread?
Yeah, 6,600 non-citizens made it onto the voter rolls. That's pretty bad. I think.
Hold on. Widespread?
Yeah.
What's your definition of widespread, by the way? Is it widespread, or is it something
asking,
that is relatively rare?
You're pounding him over the word widespread. I just would ask you,
Scott,
what is your tolerance for any fraud at all?
Is it widespread?
Absolutely. Over 6,000 people.
What is your bar for widespread?
She said, my bar is I want no tolerance. Okay. I have zero tolerance.
So what is your tolerance for American citizens?
By the way, this isn't the only place this is happening.
What is your tolerance for American citizens whose valid voter registrations are invalidated by incorrect databases? What's your tolerance for that? The Democratic governor of New Jersey, Mikey Sherrill, revealing that a software glitch had added over 6,000 non-citizens to the state's voter rolls.
In June of 2023, nearly 3 years before I became governor, a serious software error in New Jersey's motor vehicle system led to the improper voter registration of what we believe to be roughly 6,600 people in our state. In the case of this error, some individuals indicated that they weren't citizens and weren't eligible to vote, but the software registered them anyway.
The governor said that about 400 of those people cast ballots, but there's no evidence at this time that any elections were swayed. She made the surprise disclosure just days after President Trump's address to the nation, where he claimed that hundreds of thousands of non-citizens are on the rolls across the country. Sherrill promised accountability and said that the vendor responsible for the system is being replaced. She also took a swipe at the president.
Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a major political debate making headlines nationwide. A minimal software glitch in New Jersey's motor vehicle system improperly added roughly 6,600 non-citizens to the state's voter rolls over the past few years. State officials revealed that although these individuals explicitly checked boxes indicating they were non-citizens, a system error registered them anyway. While state leaders emphasized that this was a technical failure rather than intentional voter fraud, and that only a tiny fraction cast ballots without affecting election outcomes, the news has sparked intense back and forth on national cable news. Critics argue that thousands of non-citizens on the rolls point to significant vulnerabilities in election administration, using the situation to push for federal voter registration reform. On the other side, defenders stress that rapid disclosure, accountability, and system replacement are examples of proactive election security. Let me break down what happened, how the numbers stack up, and why both political sides are seizing on this story.
As the Trump administration tries to weaponize elections for political gain, I am ensuring that we protect our elections. Let me be clear. Donald Trump has zero credibility on the issue of election integrity.
The White House obviously seized on the news to help push Trump's voter ID bill, writing, quote, "Democrat glitch registers thousands of non-citizens to vote, another reason to pass the Save America Act." This is obviously not a great situation. She acknowledged that, but it also doesn't demonstrate.
New Jersey Governor Mikey Sherrill took direct aim at Donald Trump, declaring that the former president has zero credibility when it comes to the issue of election integrity. Her comments came right as she disclosed the Motor Vehicle Commission software glitch that erroneously registered roughly 6,600 non-citizens to vote in New Jersey. Rather than letting critics frame the story, Sherrill went on the offensive, framing her administration's response as a model of transparency and swift accountability, replacing the faulty software vendor and directly calling out systemic administrative failures. By pushing back, Sherrill attempted to preempt attempts by national Republicans and the Trump administration to leverage the New Jersey error as proof of widespread non-citizen voting or to build momentum for federal election overhaul legislation like the SAVE Act. The contrast she draws sets up a fierce debate. Is taking swift responsibility for a government glitch proof that election safeguards are working? Or does the glitch itself prove that current voter registration protocols are far too vulnerable? Let's dive into the political fallout and what both sides are saying about this dispute.
Demonstrate that there's widespread voter fraud in New Jersey or anywhere.
In New Jersey? 6,600 non-citizens made it onto the voter rolls. That's to me is pretty widespread voter fraud.
That's widespread?
Yeah, I think it'd be pretty bad if one person who's not a legal citizen in the United States.
The number of registered voters in the state. Do you know?
New Jersey spends $60 billion over that overall on its budget. So I think if we're seeing,
but I mean, you just said it's widespread. So where's the proof that it's widespread?
6,600 non-citizens made it onto the voter rolls.
That is 0.006% of registered voters in the state. Mikey Sherrill, she won her
I don't think it invalidates her election.
She won her election by 500,000 votes. There were 3.3 million ballots cast in that election. 400 ineligible voters. Let's say, because we don't even know, let's say they all voted for her, which maybe they did.
Yeah, it
maybe
still
they
wouldn't
didn't.
invalidate the election.
That would be about 1/100% of all the votes cast.
Yeah.
Widespread?
Yeah, 6,600 non-citizens made it onto the voter rolls. That's pretty bad. I think.
Hold on. Widespread.
Yeah.
6,600 people who were inadvertently registered to vote. The vast majority of them never cast a ballot, and you're calling 400 maybe ballots cast by people who were registered as Republicans, as Democrats, as Independents, as widespread in a state where there are 6.8 million registered voters?
Yeah, I'm with the governor of New Jersey on this. I think it's a pretty big problem.
That math doesn't math, Jesse.
Well, I didn't say it invalidated Mikey Sherrill's election result.
I didn't say you said that, but I also dispute the idea that there's any proof that this is widespread.
I think there are thousands of non-citizens on the voter rolls in New Jersey, and I'm pretty concerned about that. I would call it a widespread problem. I think the bigger problem here is that...
What's your definition of widespread, by the way? Is it 1%? Is it 2%?
I don't know, more than 100? I think it's a big problem. What's yours?
What's your tolerance for this?
Hold on. This is not about tolerance. This is about, is it widespread or is it something that is relatively rare,
You're pounding him over the word widespread. I just would ask you,
Scott,
what is your tolerance for any fraud at all?
Is it widespread?
Absolutely. Over 6,000 people.
What is your bar for widespread?
And she said, my bar is I want no tolerance. I have zero tolerance.
So what is your tolerance for American citizens?
By the way, this isn't the only place this is happening.
The clash over defining widespread highlights the foundational divide in how both sides view election administration. When Scott Jennings asserts that 6,600 non-citizens on the rolls inherently constitutes a widespread problem, he is framing the issue around systemic risk. From this perspective, the sheer volume of improper registrations, regardless of how they got there or whether individuals acted with intent, represents a dangerous breach in election safeguards. The core argument here is zero tolerance. If a state agency can accidentally add thousands of ineligible voters to the rolls, the integrity of the entire system is compromised, invalidating the principle that only legal votes should count. On the other side of the table, Amisha Cross and the host center their pushback on data and proportion. They argue that calling a technical glitch widespread voter fraud is a mischaracterization of reality. With roughly 6,800,000 registered voters in New Jersey, 6,600 accounts for about 0.1% of the total pool. More importantly, when looking at actual participation, only about 400 of those individuals cast ballots out of more than 3.3 million total votes, equating to a fraction of 0.01%. From their point of view, conflating administrative government incompetence with intentional illegal voter fraud misleads the public and inflates a fixed technical error into a political crisis. Ultimately, this exchange exposes why consensus on election integrity is so difficult to reach. One side measures the threat by the potential for vulnerability and absolute numbers, while the other measures it by statistical impact and intent. It's a fierce argument over whether a government mistake is proof that the system is broken or proof that audits and transparency are working as intended.
What's your tolerance for American citizens whose valid voter registrations are invalidated by incorrect databases? What's your tolerance for that?
I don't have tolerance for any mistakes in the electoral system, including putting non-citizens on the rolls.
So then why are we not keeping the same energy for that as we are for this?
I do have energy. As you know, I've come out here and long argued that every time we don't clean up the voter rolls, that every time a non-citizen makes it onto the voter rolls, it invalidates some legal person's vote.
What about when an American is not allowed to vote when they are eligible to vote?
I don't have any tolerance for that either. An American citizen should be allowed to vote. But American citizens are invalidated when illegal aliens are glitched onto the system.
Using a system that a federal judge recently found was actively removing U.S. citizens from the voter rolls based on inaccurate information? Why are you comfortable with that system being used to check the voter rolls.
This is a convenient deflection for you. This is the worst possible story that could happen for Democrats right now regarding the debate over the SAVE Act. 6,600 illegal aliens on the rolls in New Jersey that you know about.
Can I tell you why I think this conversation is wrong? Because, first of all, this is not the worst possible conversation. This is actually a very good conversation for Democrats because Mikey Sherrill did exactly the right thing. She was transparent.
That's all I was saying.
Let me finish. She was transparent.
And it was good.
She was transparent. She was accountable. She immediately held the people accountable. She removed the software vendor, and she criticized the former governor, who was a Democrat, criticized the former governor for failing to address the problem. That's exactly what a responsible leader is supposed to do. Exactly the opposite of what Donald Trump did in his irresponsible speech last week. Exactly the opposite of what Donald Trump did when he lost the 2020 election and he told the people in Georgia he needs to find 11,780 votes, which, by the way, is voter fraud. This is not an issue about whether it's widespread or not. It's not, because it's really a question about, is it even fraud? This was not.
This exchange flips the script on the election integrity debate by raising the opposite danger. What happens when aggressive roll cleanup measures mistakenly disenfranchise eligible American citizens? When the discussion shifts to voters who have been improperly purged, the panel hits a key tension point. While Scott Jennings argues that any non-citizen on the rolls invalidates legal votes and warrants zero tolerance, the counter-argument highlights that aggressive cross-referencing systems, often used by states to scrub voter lists, have themselves been found by federal courts to wrongfully remove valid U.S. citizens based on flawed or outdated database matching. This brings us to the fundamental trade-off in election policy, balancing security against voter access. The panel wrestles with whether the system should prioritize stopping every possible ineligible registration, even if it risks stripping real citizens of their constitutional right to vote, or focus on protecting access while addressing administrative errors transparently. It exposes the dual risks facing election officials, where technical errors can wrongly put ineligible people on the rolls, while heavy-handed remedies can just as easily knock legal voters off them.
Not fraud. This was a mistake. People were given an option. Are you a U.S. citizen or not? They said no. But the computer system incorrectly registered them to vote. They didn't do anything of their own.
That's a fair point.
Fraud required them to do something on their own purposely to defraud the system.
The suggestion that this is fraud suggests that these people were trying to vote when they
400 of them.
I think fraud.
Hold on. But let's be honest. I mean, sometimes,
incorrectly.
Listen, there's been a lot of work done on situations like this. And going back, state by state, you can go state by state. There have been cases that have looked at it. They found, maybe a couple of dozen cases over the course of 10 years, 20 years. Sometimes what happens is that when state systems are incorrect, people receive information and they are confused. And they're not voting because
this is a great
they're
point.
not voting because they're trying to defraud the system. They might have cast a ballot because they just weren't aware that they were incorrectly put on the voter roll.
They weren't aware that they weren't a citizen of the United States?
No,
they said in this instance that they weren't citizens. They were still registered.
Is this accurately described as fraud when none of these people tried to register to vote?
Yes,
they cast ballots. 400 of them cast ballots. They had to actively go do that. I assume no one voted in their name. Maybe they did. I don't know. But they actively cast a ballot. Did they not?
What I want to,
an illegal alien gets put on the rolls, however they got there, and cast a ballot.
I mean, but you acknowledge
voter fraud to me.
That some people might actually be confused, because this has come up in courts before, where some people who are ineligible to vote are not aware that they're ineligible to vote.
Guys, widespread waste, fraud, and abuse doesn't require malice. It can be a product of government incompetence. That's my point from earlier.
Okay, that's a fair point.
You raised the issue.
That's why I said the state of New Jersey spends $60 billion annual. Surely there's a gazillion other examples.
I think it's a fair point that it can be due to the government just being dumb about some of these things or making mistakes. But again, I do think it's whether it is widespread or not matters. I do think that the numbers actually matter, because if the argument is that this is so widespread that you need to override the state's constitutional rights to run their elections, then you have to actually prove that that's
actually and the numbers, 80% favorable issue.
The numbers don't prove this conversation of widespread. Language matters. Saying widespread and fraud, it matters when, to the point that you were making and that you were making, if folks were being honest about the fact that they are not citizens, and yet it was a mistake on behalf of the actual machines, and then
Keith Boykin makes a pivotal legal and semantic distinction that cuts to the heart of the entire political controversy, the difference between a government software mistake and criminal voter fraud. Boykin points out that for an act to constitute fraud, there must be intentional deception or deliberate wrongdoing by the individual. In this case, the non-citizens involved filled out their forms honestly. They explicitly checked the box stating they were non-citizens and ineligible to vote. It was the state's automated motor vehicle commission software that ignored their input and improperly added them to the registration rolls anyway. Because these individuals made no attempt to deceive election authorities or manipulate the system, Boykin argues that labeling this incident as voter fraud is fundamentally inaccurate and misleading. This distinction is crucial because it directly refutes the narrative that non-citizens are actively infiltrating state voter rolls or participating in coordinated illegal voting schemes. Instead, it exposes a clear case of administrative government incompetence. Boykin further argues that Democratic Governor Mickey Sherrill's response, publicly disclosing the error, firing the software vendor, and taking immediate steps to rectify the database, demonstrates proper executive accountability and governance, standing in stark contrast to political rhetoric that attempts to manufacture a crisis out of a technical glitch. However, the counter-argument raised by panel opponents shifts the focus from the initial registration error to the physical act of voting. While the registration itself was a government mistake, approximately 400 of those individuals subsequently cast ballots. Critics contend that regardless of how an ineligible individual ends up on the voter rolls, the moment a ballot is cast by someone legally prohibited from voting, the integrity of the election outcome is compromised. From this perspective, whether the cause is deliberate malice or administrative error, the end result, an illegal vote entering the ballot box, carries the same real-world consequence. This debate illustrates why terminology matters so deeply in national political discourse. Framing the event as fraud fuels demands for sweeping federal restrictions like the SAVE Act, under the premise that the election system is under deliberate attack. Framing it as an administrative mistake places the solution on technical fixes, state-level oversight, and vendor accountability, while warning against knee-jerk legislation that could end up disenfranchising legal American citizens. Ultimately, Boykin's argument highlights the fine line between fixing genuine government errors and weaponizing those errors for broader political agendas.
The Democrat in office took accountability for it. This is actually modeling making sure that our elections are safe and fair. But what is happening is, in order to ram through the SAVE Act, in order to sow this discord, let me actually finish, to sow this discord that for some reason there's this quote unquote widespread voter fraud in this country, the Republicans, Donald Trump leading this, is taking this honest mistake that Democrats, again, are cleaning up.
He's correcting the mistake.
In order to push their agenda.
You are making the argument that because
the governor corrected her mistake.
She absolutely did. She did a good job of it. But the president's argument about that there's a widespread problem here is clearly
to ram through the SAVE Act that is actually unfair to many American people.
Clearly it's a credible argument because this mistake was in place.
All right, we're going to leave it there.
In this closing segment, panelist Ashley Allison Johnson brings the discussion full circle by reframing how we should view administrative errors in election systems. Rather than viewing the New Jersey glitch as proof of a broken electoral process, she argues that Governor Mickey Sherrill's handling of the situation is a model for election security. A leader discovering a system failure, being completely transparent with the public, holding the vendor accountable, and taking immediate corrective action. Johnson contends that when officials act with full transparency and fix technical vulnerabilities in real time, it demonstrates that election safeguards are functioning as designed. She warns against political actors using honest administrative mistakes to sow widespread distrust in election outcomes or to push restrictive federal legislation like the SAVE Act under the guise of an emergency. Looking at the broader video, this entire panel encapsulates the deep national divide over election integrity, voter rolls, and political messaging. The core event stems from a software glitch at New Jersey's Motor Vehicle Commission that mistakenly added roughly 6,600 self-identified non-citizens to voter rolls, leading to around 400 ballots being cast out of millions of votes statewide. On one side, conservative voices emphasize a zero-tolerance policy, arguing that any non-citizens on voter rolls, regardless of intent or scale, represent a major vulnerability that demands sweeping federal reform. On the other side, progressives emphasize scale, intent, and accountability, pointing out that the glitch was non-malicious, affected a tiny fraction of a percent of voters without impacting election outcomes, and was transparently corrected by state leadership. Ultimately, this debate highlights the fine balance required in election policy, protecting the system from administrative errors and unauthorized voting, while ensuring legitimate American citizens are not wrongfully disenfranchised by aggressive voter purges or overcorrected legislation. Thanks for watching. If you found this breakdown helpful and want to stay informed on the latest political debates and news analysis, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel.